What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I am feeling like the ultimate hacker.
Oh, the ultimate hack. Oh my god, it's fucking Matthew Lillard. He's got the Ultimate Warrior's face paint on him. He's raising the fucking roof and clicky-clacking his keyboard. Do your hacking abilities have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
You know, this time I'm gonna say it. It absolutely has everything to do with my heavy metal street cred.
Nice.
So I have been recently replaying the game Watch Dogs, which came out, I can't believe I'm saying this, 10 years ago.
Oh boy.
And for those of you who don't know, Watch Dogs is a game where you basically play as like a hacker vigilante, and you're in the city of Chicago, which now runs on a central operating system, which means that you can like hack traffic lights and like raise drawbridges and shit like that. So
Every 8-year-old's dream.
yeah, so it's really cool. It's fun gameplay. You know, cops are chasing you. You can raise like bollards from the ground behind you, and the cops crash into it and shit like that. It's a lot of fun. You know, there's hacking mini games and all this and that. But I remember when the game came out, and I was reminded of it as I played the game, is that I made the joke that considering the game is all about like hardcore hackers and computer hackers and this and that, I was surprised that there was no like stereotypical computer nerds, because the vigilante you play as, Aiden Pierce, like he's a badass. He's running around in like a baseball cap and a jacket with his guns and everything and hacking stuff. This other hacker you work with, this girl Clara, she's covered in tattoos, has her dimples pierced, like all of that.
Yeah, this came out 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then there's like the one guy who turns out to be like kind of a villain or whatever, who basically looks like Mickey Rourke dressed like a hipster. Like his face looks like Mickey Rourke, but he's wearing a knit cap.
Oh my god.
So these are some of the
That's just fucking Mickey Rourke,
like,
dude.
yeah. So these are just like the ultimate hacker characters, but then there's the character of T-Bone. And if you looked at T-Bone, he is a white dude with a long goatee, dreads, and he has goggles on top of his hat. And if you looked at this guy, you'd be like, this dude 100% listens to Ministry. A couple missions later, you're like defending his fortress, and he's like, oh, we gotta listen to some tunes. And what's he fucking put on? Jesus Built My Hot Rod by Ministry. And I'm like, okay, so there's no stereotypical nerds, but there's the confirmed stereotype that white dudes with dreads listen to Ministry. Like, this is like, I wouldn't necessarily say the character was modeled after Al Jorgensen, but it was modeled after someone who would model their own style after Al Jorgensen. And so I just thought it was so funny how like that's the stereotype they go with. They're like, oh, this guy who looks like he listens to Ministry does listen to Ministry. But there's like no like nerds in this video game that's all about like the greatest hackers in the world. And I just always thought that was funny, that it was like, oh yeah, of course that guy wants to have Ministry blasting while he's like setting off bombs that he booby-trapped his fortress with. So that's what I've been doing, is listening to Ministry while helping T-Bone defend his fortress in the game Watch Dogs.
Fucking T-Bone. You know what? I love the like Hollywood version of hackers. Like I mentioned Matthew Lillard and fucking Angelina Jolie, you know what I mean? It's like, it's the goggles, it's the leather, it's like the mismatched fucking clothing. It's like, you get this idea that hackers are Penelope Garcia from fucking Criminal Minds. Like, they just all look like that, or the goth girl from fucking NCIS. Yeah. When in reality, like, if you've watched Soft White Underbelly, you see it's just like a dude. It's just the guy named Craig in a hoodie. Yeah. It's like, I think Mr. Robot is probably the closest that we've gotten to seeing like real life hackers, like what they just look like day in and day out.
Yep.
And, even then it's a bit of like the over the top sort of stereotypes. But yeah, never any like really nerdy looking people.
No. It's funny you mentioned because I was suddenly reminded of something that I thought I had blocked out of my memory. Talking about the Hollywood version of Hackers. Uh-huh. The TV show on CW, Arrow, which is about Green Arrow, which I did like for a while, and then it got bad. One of the
then it turned into a CW show.
So one of the characters, Felicity, she was, to quote the latest Spider-Man movies, the guy in the chair. And she was like the hacker for Green Arrow. And so there was an episode where they went into her backstory where she was like, a hacktivist, with like Anonymous or whatever the show's version of Anonymous was. Uh-huh. And one of her, like her hacker boyfriend from like 5 years or 7 years earlier shows up. And there's a scene where it's supposed to be implied that he was forced to keep hacking something. Uh-huh. And his fucking fingertips are bleeding all over the keyboard as he's typing. And I remember watching this and thinking, this is the stupidest fucking thing I have ever seen in any media. And this was probably shortly before I made the decision to stop watching the show entirely. Uh-huh. And sure enough, I go on and all anyone is talking about is the stupid fucking scene where the guy's fingertips are bleeding because he was forced to hack nonstop. And it's like, that is the stupidest thing any of us has ever seen. Yeah. And you talking about the Hollywood idea of what a hacker looked like, I was reminded of that and was like, oh my God, that was so dumb and so funny.
Oh, man. Chris, do you think I love that we got a mention of Ministry and Al Jurgensen nice and early in this episode. Do you know if they ever won a Grammy?
I do not believe so. I do think they've been nominated.
Okay.
But I don't
Sometimes that's half the fucking battle.
Yeah, I don't believe Ministry has won one because I actually did some research and I don't remember seeing their name in the list. But yeah, I think they've only been nominated.
Man, that's a damn shame. Yep. That's a damn fucking shame. And for a lot of people, we've had this conversation time and time again. It's a lot of people's opinion that metal does not belong in the Grammys. Metal should not be striving to be part of the Grammys, and heavy music and, music that's on the fringes should not want to be recognized by an organization like the Grammys. And I feel like, who wouldn't want to win a Grammy? Who wouldn't want all of this work and their artistry to be recognized, especially when it really turns out that it's kind of the peers that are putting in the nominations and voting for the people who are winning the Grammys. So why is it that there are so few metal artists that actually win Grammys for their music? And why do we see the same bands winning or being nominated for their metal music? So that's what I wanted to get into in this episode, the Grammy problem, and why we're just seeing the same sorts of, the same bands being nominated, the same bands winning, and what is exactly going on behind the scenes that's causing this. Chris, I actually sent you an interview on the Downbeat podcast, which Spiritbox, Courtney LaPlante and Mike Stringer were being interviewed of the band Spiritbox, and they brought up a really interesting point. Chris, are you excited to dive, maybe hack in even, to the real source code of the Grammy problem?
I am so excited to have this discussion. I feel like early on, one of my favorite bullying targets on this show was Eddie Trunk, and his insistence to get mad every year about the Grammys and the disrespect that the Grammys show towards rock and metal, and how the rock and metal categories are never shown on TV, and the rock and metal artists are never nominated for the major awards, and rock and metal artists never get to perform on the show, and when they do, it's a fucking disaster. So I am very excited to have this discussion, and it was interesting watching that interview and hearing what, Courtney had to say about the Grammys and being nominated, because it was an interesting perspective to see it from someone who is like, it's one thing as a fan to be like, yeah, this fucking sucks. They have no idea what they're doing. And then you see, like I talked about Slayer, where Tom and Jeff do the, cordial thing and are like, hey, we're not there, but thanks for the win. And then you have Kerry King who's like, who gives a shit?
Right.
It's interesting to see the perspective of someone who seems to see the same problems the fans see, but is able to talk about it in a way that is not just like a Kerry King being like, oh, well, I don't actually give a shit anyway.
Right. Not only do I not give a shit, but I knew I wasn't going to fucking win anyway, or like that sort of thing. I guess that's part of the reason why I reached out to you about doing this episode, is I was so surprised to see how they were talking about it, almost in like this sort of not wanting to get their hopes up sort of way. Yeah. They wound up not winning for the what they were nominated for, which was Best Metal Performance, which is another topic that we're going to get back into later on, and the oddities of that fucking phrasing. But it was almost like I remember seeing them nominated, and I was like, holy shit, Spiritbox has a chance to fucking win. But the people that they were up against was Metallica and Ghost doing an Iron Maiden cover. And I was like, what the fuck? Why are these other two artists being nominated? And it's not to shit on any artist in particular. That's not what this episode's going to be about. It's more so trying to find exactly what the problem is, because yes, it very often feels as though metal is not respected by the Grammys. And like I said, a lot of people have the opinion that who cares? We don't want to be recognized by the fucking Grammys anyway. The Grammys suck and blah, blah, blah. But is there something that could be done? Are there changes that can be made so that metal is better represented and that it doesn't just feel like the redheaded stepchild that's kind of being shown off screen? Chris, what do you think your biggest takeaway was from that interview? And before you answer that, I also want to just shout out Craig for the Downbeat podcast, which is awesome. I have been binging a bunch of the episodes. Definitely check him out here on YouTube. I know he says you're an idiot if you just listen to the audio formats, but I guess he puts in a lot of production value into the show, so it's worth watching it. But yeah, just really, really, really cool interview with Courtney and Mike from Spiritbox. I was fucking cracking up at Courtney's impression of Mike Tyson. But yeah, what do you think your biggest takeaway was from that?
I was very surprised to hear Courtney mention that she thought it was a problem of genre, because there are, from doing some very quick research and from what I know, there's like best rock performance and best metal performance.
Right.
And that's it for rock music.
Yeah.
You have rock and metal.
Yeah.
And so with the metal performance, like you said, you have Spiritbox going up against Metallica and Ghost.
Yeah.
Now, to metal fans, we know that those are three very different styles of metal.
Right.
But to someone who is not as familiar with metal, they think everyone's Metallica anyway. The same way your parents think every video game system is a Nintendo.
Yep.
People who
all cereal as cornflakes.
People who don't listen to metal don't know the difference between different subgenres. So while I understand completely where Courtney is coming from and saying like, hey, if we were in a metalcore category, thank you. Or if, there was a hardcore category, that makes more sense than saying, yeah, Metallica, because at that point, is the Grammys almost saying, oh, all metal is the same, that Spiritbox, Ghost, and Metallica are all the same. which like I feel like that goes into a very weird rabbit hole of like, are we really going to let the same people who gave the first Metal Grammy to Jethro Tull, are we going to trust them to accurately divide these subgenres like into different categories? There's no way that would work. And you know, there was a few different things that Courtney was saying that I'm sure we'll continue to talk about. But I think the thing that was most surprising to me was her suggestion of different subgenres, because yes, it would be great for metal to have more than just one category.
Right.
But at the same time, I think from the Grammys perspective is, as much as we love metal, is it worth it to create all these different categories for subgenres when they're not even going to show them on TV, which is a separate issue. But as much as I understand the idea that's like, well, of course, you know, having Spiritbox, Ghost, and Metallica in the same category, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure how you fix that for the Grammys, you know, realistically.
I think the biggest thing that I had taken away from it, and I agree with you, I think that if we start getting into the weeds and really start nitpicking and kind of, you know, like we talked about it in our genre smorgasbord episode, where how far do you take it?
Yeah.
You know, do you have best black metal performance? Do you have best black and death metal performance? Shit like that. Like, are we going to get that granular? Or is it simply a matter of having best metal, best heavy metal, best rock, best metal, modern metal, metalcore, maybe metalcore and, you know, hardcore all get lumped into modern metal, but then people are going to be like, well, hey, why are In Flames up against Hatebreed, like very different styles of music? You know, it's almost inviting more problems and more criticism, I think. And I don't know, maybe from the way they were talking about it, it also comes down to the people who are on the committee.
Yeah.
And you know, it really is their peers too, because the people that are getting nominated are also on, you know, within the group of people who are going to be voting anyway. So do we need to have, if we want more representation, should the artists be showing up more to show that representation there and kind of clarify things and make some changes? You know, it's not to put it all on the artist and say that it's, you know, we're not victim blaming. But is it a matter of like, well, if we want to see change, then be the change you want to see and go in and support and nominate the bands that you think really deserve the nomination and vote for the bands who, you know, really deserve to have been out there? Because I remember talking about this with the heavy metal intern Russell and saying like, it would be so cool for Spiritbox to win, because not only do you have a modern metal band who is doing a lot of different types of music within their releases. Like the Rotoscope single doesn't sound anything like the music that was on Eternal Blue. Everything is just so different from release to release, but all still with that same sort of spirit. No pun intended. It would have been so cool to have a band like that, especially with a female singer. Yeah. You know what I mean? To have a front woman up there representing modern metal, especially when they've been making so many waves within the metal community.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of supporters. They've got a lot of fans. So it was so disappointing to see them lose, especially when it was to Metallica, I believe.
Yes.
You know, even people were like, why would Ghost even be nominated when they're doing a cover of an Iron Maiden song? And it's just like, where is the accountability? Do you know what I mean? Like, who is really to blame? Is it really just the Grammys as like an organization, or is it the people who are voting and putting the nominations out there? I guess I'm not completely familiar with how it works, the exact nuance of it, but who do you think it falls on?
So it's interesting because I know Courtney brought it up, and I think Craig even commented on it in that interview, where what artists, or I think it might be artist input, but I think some of it is the record labels send out there for your consideration, which is, I'm more familiar with that for, filmmaking, and going to school for film, and I'll get into it. I am more on the fence, on the side of the fence that's like, I don't give a shit about award shows. But when I was in film school, like, we didn't do March Madness brackets. We did fucking Grammy brackets. We would, Academy Award brackets. We would hand out a sheet of paper with the nominations on it, and we'd all guess who was going to win each award. Nowadays, I could care less. Couldn't care less. But with the Grammys, it is for your consideration. All of these artists, all of these, record companies, all of these producers send out songs or music or whatever it is and say, hey, we, consider us for these awards. Mm-hmm. So, Craig makes the joke like, oh, I'm just going to remaster some of my own stuff and submit it on, for myself. So I think part of it is who is submitting. Mm-hmm. And I think that does raise the question of who's making the decision of what to submit. Because I would like to think the artist has input, but with some of the weird cases you see throughout the history of these Grammys, is the artist always making the decision, or is it just a record producer or someone from a record label saying, hey, I want this song nominated? I don't care what the artist thinks is their best representation. I think this song should be the one that represents. And so I'm not 100% on how that process works, but there is a part of me that wouldn't be surprised if some of it is almost outside of the artist's control over what is being submitted on their behalf. And then the other thing that's interesting, because I was thinking about this and I decided to do this research, is who's voting. Because the people that are voting for album of the year or song of the year, and based on the artists that win those genres, are people who are fans of that music deciding who wins a metal Grammy. Because, realistically, how many people are going to be listening to Spiritbox and whoever wins album of the year, which is probably like a pop song or a hip hop song? Obviously, those people exist who love both styles of music, but I feel like more often than not, you're going to find people who prefer one over the other. So I looked it up. Apparently, the way it works is everyone who is a part of the Grammy version of the Academy gets to vote for the 4 major awards. And then out of the other 30 categories, you vote for the 10 that you're most familiar with. So if you're someone there are awards for spoken word albums. So if your expertise is in spoken word albums, it's encouraged that you should only vote for the spoken word if you're an expert in spoken word. So there's nothing saying you're not allowed to vote for genres you know nothing about or categories you know nothing about, but it is very much encouraged, since you only get 10 votes, only vote on the things that you are familiar with. So the people that are voting for metal are people familiar with metal music, you would hope. But again, there is also that, what counts as being familiar with metal? Because like we said, Metallica has the most wins in the category. And they are arguably the most popular metal band in the world. So maybe it makes sense, based on how the rest of the Grammys go, that the most popular artists are the ones who win. Because I'll never forget, didn't Arcade Fire win Record of the Year one year? And people had a fucking riot online. And they're like, who the fuck are these people?
It was the same year that the fucking Where the Wild Things Are came out. And everybody was crying over that song in the trailer. That's why.
So,
myself included.
Yeah. That's the only song by Arcade Fire I like. But it's interesting to learn all of that and learn, about the nomination process and the voting process, because at first I was like, oh, it's a bunch of fucking clueless people who have no idea what they're doing voting for this stuff. It's like, no, people are encouraged to vote about the things that they know best about, but that still doesn't change the fact that it is very frustrating as a fan to watch.
Yeah, I know that this sentiment, I've carried this sentiment since high school of like, you know what? We're never going to be represented. They don't even televise our awards. Like, they don't have the respect for the artist to have the awards televised. And like, I know that I'm in the minority when I'm like, I want more metal representation in the Grammys.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know that I'm necessarily at the point of like, oh, fuck the Grammys. Like, I think with most award shows, it's just kind of like, it's just a popularity contest. So I think that's where that feeling comes from. But I would love for some of my favorite bands to get the recognition. Even Slipknot, I feel like, is a band that's now like won a Grammy or two maybe. And even them, I'm like, you could give it to somebody else. I think that they're at the point now where they're big enough and recognizable enough. And if it really does come down to, hey, vote for whoever you're most familiar with, I'm sure that people going through the ballot are going to go, oh, Slipknot. Like, I know I've heard that name before. I saw Clown at the backstage fucking, like craft table or something like that after the awards last year. Let me vote for him. But I know that there are like other award shows out there specifically for metal, and like the Kerrang Awards and stuff like that. And it's, I guess, just typical of metal and rock in general to be like, you know what, we are not getting the representation that we feel we deserve, and the people who are involved just do not care. They don't understand and do not care to understand what our type of music is about. So we're going to start our own thing. You saw the same thing with festivals. It was the same thing with, Lollapalooza leading into Ozfest. Like that's why we have Ozfest. It's the fucking 9/11 My Chemical Romance timeline sort of thing. Like, but I think that I'm grateful that there's at least other avenues that bands can get some representation and get some recognition in. It's just a shame that the Grammys doesn't seem to care to try to fix any of the problems that we have with it. I think that it's very easy, and I think that as, like with a lot of things that get voted on, as the old timers make their way out, hopefully some of the younger people that are involved can start suggesting these changes. Like, do you think that there is like a silent wave of people in the metal community who are like, hey, I know how to schmooze and I know how to play the game of the Grammys, and I'm going to work my way to try to have some more influence so that we can get more representation for metal? Like, do I sound like a fucking conspiracy theorist right now? Do I sound like a hacker?
So it's interesting you bring that up for a couple different reasons, because as we're having this discussion, it started making me think of the Baseball Hall of Fame, because I'm a big fan of baseball. Right. And the Baseball Hall of Fame is voted on by the writers. Mm-hmm. And what was...
Right, the most exciting part of baseball, the writers.
Well, the idea is that the writers are responsible for watching these players play every single day. And so the idea is that they're going to be familiar with what these players have done, almost more from a fan's perspective than from as like a fellow player or manager's perspective. Uh-huh. So it's writers who do the voting. But a problem that came up, and I think it was very much something that came up when Ken Griffey Jr. made it into the Hall of Fame. He made it in Same year as Mike Piazza, by the way, who two of my all-time favorite baseball players from when I was a kid. Ken Griffey Jr. makes it in. And the thing about Ken Griffey Jr. is that a lot of people thought that Ken Griffey Jr. should be the first unanimous Hall of Famer. That every single person votes for Ken Griffey Jr. because he was just that good of a player. And that nice of a guy as well, which I think also when you endear yourself to people, people want to vote for this person. And he wasn't unanimous. And people are like, who the fuck decided that one of the greatest ball players in the history of the game didn't deserve to go in as a unanimous Hall of Famer?
Was it Alex Rodriguez? Tell me it was Alex Rodriguez.
Well, no. What ends up happening is that you have these old writers that don't even work as writers anymore. They're retired. So it's not even their job to watch baseball anymore. Right. And they're taking this, because baseball loves their unwritten rules. They're like, oh, well, no one's ever been unanimous. Or like only one player, like maybe Babe Ruth was unanimous, but no one else should ever be unanimous. And that's why I didn't vote for him. And it's like, that's the stupidest fucking reason I've ever heard to not vote for that, which is why they started changing who gets to vote. And eventually, Mariano Rivera, the infamous closer from the Yankees, used Enter Sandman, which I think he stole from Billy Wagner, maybe, possibly. But Mariano Rivera there will never be another closer like Mariano Rivera. He was the first unanimous, well-deserved. And I think that happens because the writers and the fans are like, hey, some of these guys kind of deserve it. The fact that you are withholding votes from people simply because you think there's an unwritten rule that says they shouldn't get your vote is a very stupid reason. And things started to change. And so I could see that happening with the Grammys, where it is new people that are being more in touch with new music saying, hey, these are the artists that we think, not just in metal, but across the board, should be getting respected by this award.
Right.
The other problem is, I think the disdain for the Grammys has gone beyond metal.
Yeah.
And I think as a whole, a lot of music fans are kind of like, you know what? The Grammys are kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
And so is it really...
Not just the fans, but I think the artists as well.
Like, is it really worth saving something that we actually are starting to decide we don't give a shit about?
Right.
And so it does feel like that's an attitude that's being taken by more and more people, not just metal fans.
Right. That's a good point, because you see... How many times do you see people get up for their acceptance speech and they're like, hey, I think it's kind of bullshit that this person wasn't voted for.
Yeah.
Hey, I think that, you know what I mean? And it's not just metal. I mean, I think Jay-Z, sticking up for Beyonce is... What can I say? It's Beyonce's won so much. She's won so much. She's gotten so much recognition. Like, good for her. Well deserved. But, that would be like being like, hey, we really fucked over Metallica that first time, so let's just fucking give them one because they deserve it for the heartbreak that we gave them. And we did fuck up that one performance that they had with Lady Gaga. We tried to give them a chance to bring metal to the main stage, and we fucked that up too. But I don't know. I think that, and I hope that there would be that kind of turn of events where people are there. I think something needs to happen to restore people's faith in the Grammys and artists' faith in the Grammys for them to say, like, oh, okay, it's worth trying to turn things around. It's worth trying to save things. It's shocking just how similar this feels to current events, Chris, and I'm not liking this. I was not expecting this episode to go this way. But you know what? Yeah, sometimes there needs to be a movement of people who are like, we know that everything is shit right now. We know that things are falling apart, but if we do nothing, then nothing fucking changes.
Yep.
So I think maybe that's just the attitude that some of the artists have to take in order to turn things around. We're still talking about the Grammys, right? I promise you, we're still talking about the Grammys.
Only talking about the Grammys.
Yeah. For the love of God, only talking about the Grammys. But yeah, I really loved that interview with Courtney and Mike, and I thought it was really eye-opening. I loved to go on a bit of a tangent. I loved their story about doing their collaboration with Megan Thee Stallion.
Yeah,
because I think that collaboration between Megan and fucking first name basis between Megan Thee Stallion.
Excuse me, it's Miss Thee Stallion.
I think that is just awesome. I mean, we've talked about time and time again how much I love like when artists will reach out and like blend styles and things like that, and I think it's so cool that not only did her team reach out to Spiritbox, but then that it was such a quick turnaround that they were even surprised with themselves, because now you've got, again, it's like someone as iconic as Megan Thee Stallion now working with Courtney in Spiritbox, who I think she really is an icon, and hopefully, I mean, like I said, there was kind of that. They kept mentioning where like, oh, we're not going to win.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even watch the nominations because they were like, there's no way we were getting nominated. And then to know that they didn't win just has that like bitter, that bittersweet taste. But I hope that artists like them start to try to change, bring in some of that change. I think it is worth trying to save it because it used to mean something. You know what I mean? It used to mean something to say like, yeah, I had a Grammy. And it's like, I don't care how much fucking street cred you have. I don't care how much heavy metal street cred you have. At least I think that everyone is working for the adoration of their fans, right? They want to know that they are making music that they're happy with. But to be recognized on a world stage like that is incredible. Who wouldn't want that sort of recognition? And I guess it's not a necessity to have that stamp of approval, but just to have an organization like that say, hey, we recognize what you're doing. The people voted and you're deserving of this. That's why it's so funny to me when people are like, nah, fuck it. Like, cause fuck it. But, but at the same time, I think that there is something within there that's worth saving. If only for the younger up and coming artists, give them an opportunity to go ahead and at least let there be some change there for them. Even if it's not going to affect our generation of metal bands, the bands that we like and the acts that we like, hopefully there's some change that starts to stir up so that the younger generation of bands starts to get some recognition and starts to be put on there on the main stage, and that we start to see more and more respect for the style of music. Again, this is sounding way too real right now for my own liking. Yeah, I mean, what do you think it would take to really change that public opinion, knowing that people and artists are kind of just like, fuck the Grammys? What do you think it would really take? Who would have to win for people to kind of change their tune?
You know, it's tough talking about the Grammys and award shows in general, but I feel like the Grammys is something I think the thing about the Grammys and music in general is that I think it's easier for listeners of music to make a decision of whether something is good or not in their opinion, or if it's something that is within their taste. You know, I think when it comes to movies or TV shows, there's a certain amount of like, you need to put some effort in to watch a movie or a TV show. With music, I can go into Spotify and listen to whatever the fuck I want. It is so easy to listen to music, and so I think music is almost more of it's a more universal thing that people enjoy and listen to. And so I think when something is that easily widespread, the things that appeal to the widest amount of people are going to be the things that get recognized.
Yeah.
I have talked about at times of my dislike of Taylor Swift. And I've even seen some people in earnest, like myself, say, I just don't get it. And I think the thing about Taylor Swift is that for someone like me who likes music that is a little bit aggressive and is doing things that are not going to have the widest appeal. They are going to have dissonant sounds. It's going to have sounds that are not pleasant to most people's ears. Taylor Swift has perfected the art of making music that appeals to the biggest audience possible. And so I think because music is something that is so easy to consume, it makes it easy for the Grammys and for the people voting on the Grammys to vote for the thing that just sounds the nicest. Not that it did anything groundbreaking or not that it did anything that transcended the genre or that did something that completely changed the landscape of music or how music is produced. I think because of how accessible music is, it's easier to just say, well, this song was the easiest for me to listen to and kind of made me feel kind of happy when I was listening to it. So that's the song I'm going to vote for. And so for those reasons, I think that's why there would have to be a completely different mindset in the people voting. And I don't know how easy that is for fans of music. And it's I've talked about it before, how like there are styles of music I don't like, but as someone who listens to metal or punk or this aggressive music, I'm kind of expected to just put up with hearing music I don't like all the time.
Yeah.
But the minute I put on something that I want to listen to, all of a sudden that's a problem.
Right.
Because the vast majority of people don't want to hear that.
Right.
And so you would need to have this thought process change in the people voting for it to be like, I may not like what they did, but from a technical aspect, from a music writing aspect, you know, I feel like what happens sometimes when I look up like rap or hip hop songs, I have to assume part of it is because of how much they sample. They need to credit the people who wrote the original sample. But you look at the writing credits on a hip hop song and there's like 40 people.
Yeah.
And then there is Metallica, who has won plenty of Grammys, but the writing credits on a Metallica song are Metallica. The 4 guys who perform that song, or maybe a 5th guy who's in a different band now, but for the most part, the 4 guys who performed that song wrote that song. And while it's a collaboration between those 4, that's 4 people who wrote a song that is way more complex than what is winning these Grammys. And it took 40 people to write something that, to my ears, sounds pretty basic. So I think there would have to be a fundamental change in mentality of what deserves to win. Is it based on what's popular, or is it based on a technical writing prowess? Because then there are artists, you know, me and my brother have talked about the band Streetlight Manifesto and how their primary songwriter, Thomas Kalnoky, is like a musical genius with some of the things he writes. You know, I recently mentioned the weirdness of They Might Be Giants.
Right.
They write some really interesting melodies and really interesting music. You know, even fucking Weird Al and the song Hardware Store off of Poodle Hat, that song goes way harder than any Weird Al song deserves. And yet he's not going to get recognized for his ability to write a song because no one wants to hear Weird Al sing about how excited he is that a hardware store is being built.
Yeah.
So there would have to be a fundamental change in the thought process of what deserves to win, and I don't think that's gonna happen.
It's because it comes back to many people's notion, and rightly so, that it's really just a popularity contest.
Yes.
It's really just and being being involved in awards based activities myself, I can definitely say that there are times where you just have to play the politics of it. And, you know, there's definitely times where you've got to make those decisions, and it's like, it's not always the most fun. And it's like, you know, you want to not make those decisions if you're not forced to, but sometimes it's just like, this is just the move that we have to make, unfortunately. I feel like, and I love that you brought up Taylor Swift. Because I think, and this is maybe not so much a bit of a tangent from our actual topic, but I think a lot of times it is discounted just how important the taste of young women is for making a fucking artist. Look at the Beatles. The band that the most gatekeepy, annoying, insufferable fucking people will be like, well, the fucking Beatles didn't need any of this stuff, and look at everything the Beatles did in such a short amount of time. I love the Beatles, but guess who made the Beatles? Young women. Without young women and a fan base made of young women in their early days, the Beatles would not have reached the heights that they reached. It was that the deafening screams in Shea Stadium from these young women is what made a band like the Beatles as immensely popular and just as world-changing as they were. It was thanks to the love that these young women had for the band. You know, be it the band, be it the music, or be it just the band members. Like, don't discount just how important they were to the history of rock and roll. So what I'm saying is we have to get more and more young women into death metal, black metal. I know they're fucking out there. It's not like, you know, there's like, you know, one woman to every fucking 40 guys at a metal show. You know what I mean? Like, it's sometimes it looks that way, but no. I think that maybe if young women got more involved within the Grammy settings, that things would start to change, because look at how shit fucking blows up nowadays on TikTok. You know what I mean? Just look at how Ghost fucking blew up on TikTok and reached a whole new set of fans that they hadn't had before, because young women got into one song. That's all it took. You know what I mean? Let's do the same thing for more extreme fucking metal, and maybe we'll start to get some more representation in there. I know it can happen. I think the key is turning the Swifties into corpses. Maybe.
It could work. It could work. Why not?
It could work.
Like you're saying, if we could get this music more popular, we'd be fine. And that was something interesting that Courtney from Spiritbox also brought up in that interview, is that as much as we as artists and fans love this music, it is not nearly as popular as every other style of music that is being represented at the Grammys. And that's something that I sometimes forget when listening to bands. And I have a very specific story I want to tell here. So I look at like the monthly listeners on Spotify. And like I said, Metallica, one of, if not the most popular metal band, 27 million monthly listeners for Metallica.
Yeah.
You know, Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, over 1 billion listens to both of those songs. There are other songs, all hundreds of millions of listeners. You look at the rest of the big four, Slayer, 4.9 million. You know, 200 million listens to Raining Blood is the highest. Right. Megadeth, similar numbers. just under 5 million. I think Symphony of Destruction is like 300 million listens.
Yeah.
Anthrax at 1.2 million. They don't even have a song that hits 100 million. Their highest is Madhouse at 60 million. And those are like some of the most popular thrash metal bands. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like Overkill was like less than 100,000 listens, or like the number was not nearly as big as I thought it should be for a band like Overkill. But like bands that I've talked about on this show that I love, bands like Hexen or Traitor, which like Hexen isn't even making music anymore, so it doesn't surprise me. But Traitor is a band that's kind of starting to grow, and you know, they've got Angel Ripper from Sodom on one of their songs, Total Thrash, 12,000 monthly listeners. You know, Traitor has, you know, one song that's approaching 500,000 listens. Right. And then there's a band like Space Chaser, who I believe I've talked about how much I love them. 1,500 listeners a month. They have one song over 100,000 listens. And for me, that's kind of like, yeah, it's not unheard of for me to find a band, fall in love with them, and 3 out of their top 5 songs says it's less than 1,000 listens. Yeah. So like that's the type of music I'm listening to. It's this music that while some of it is very popular, some of it not as much. And every once in a while I get culture shock when I see a really popular artist, because I was watching the Charismatic Voice react to Billie Eilish perform What Was I Made For? That was in the Barbie movie. I fucking love that song. And so I had already loved that song. I watched Elizabeth's reaction on the Charismatic Voice. I'm like, oh, let me go listen to it. Billie Eilish has 97 million monthly listeners. That is like 4 times as much as Metallica, the most popular metal band. Billions of listens on her songs. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why she gets featured on the Grammys and why Metallica is shown like along a ticker along the bottom of the screen that they won. Like, oh, yeah, I forgot that even though I love this music and want to shout from the rooftops that it's the greatest, you know, form of art in music, most people don't care and don't like it. There are way more people listening to other music. And so I think that kind of goes back to like, you know, we can make all these suggestions of, oh, this is what the Grammys should do to, you know, make the Metal Grammys a better representation of hard rock and heavy metal music. And the reality is most of the audience doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
They don't care. And, you know, if the audience doesn't care, then the Grammys aren't going to care.
Yeah. Damn. What a bummer. All right, Chris, now that you've sufficiently bummed me out with that last statement, what's your suggestion for us this week?
So my suggestion this week, I briefly mentioned this band already. That is Anthrax and their Grammy-nominated album, Persistence of Time.
All right.
This came out in, I believe, 1991 and features some really great songs. You've got Keep It in the Family off of that album, which is a song that I love. Their cover of Got the Time is on this album, which is a great song. And then my favorite Anthrax song are the 2 tracks that flow into each other, Intro to Reality and Belly of the Beast. So I definitely suggest everyone check out this Grammy-nominated album that I believe lost to Metallica, either for one or their cover of Stone Cold Crazy. I forget which. But yeah, go check out Anthrax and their Grammy-nominated Persistence of Time.
All right, well, I'm going to suggest a band that also lost to Metallica, and that's the band Spiritbox. Their interview was the inspiration behind this episode, and it's just so interesting to hear Mike and Courtney speak.
Yep.
Again, kudos to Craig for running a great show himself and having artists like them on there. Just listen to anything from them. Like I mentioned earlier on in the episode, none of their stuff sounds exactly like the last release. And I'm not only impressed by Courtney's ability as a singer, I'm vastly impressed by Mike's ability as a songwriter, as a guitarist, and I love what they do with being able to mix these crazy sort of gent guitars and very technical guitars and these nice atmospheric electronic elements along with these crazy vocals, and it just so much talent that's wrapped up into this band. So absolutely check out, and maybe even next time vote for the band Spiritbox. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night. Oh, damn. I was going to bring up the idea that we should start our own fucking Grammys. The Scrap Metal Awards.
The Scrappies. You'll be Scrappy nominated.